o'clock Monday, February 5th, 2024. I'm going to just go over the topic again, which I think everybody pretty much knows, but I'm just going to read it verbatim. So this is a proposed plan development hub Clemson. An application for a plan development was submitted by CS Acquisition LLC on November 3rd, 2023. If approved as proposed, 9 parcels totaling approximately 5.5 acres near Kiwi Trail and Wall Street in the Uptown District of the city will be developed as mixed-use plan development project comprised of 450 student-oriented residential units, 1,300 beds, and 8,500 square feet of commercial retail space. And then there's additional documents, obviously, on the city website for your reference. Just to kind of lay some ground rules tonight, or this afternoon, I should say. 5-minute limit for each speaker, please, during this public hearing. And speakers are limited to repeating. If possible, try not to repeat the same information, state your agreement, and only speak new information if possible. That would help allow everybody within this room or any other comments that we receive to make sure everybody's heard. And so thank you for your cooperation, and we'll open it up with Core to give an update on where you're at. So I will turn it over. And I think, Allie, you've already given the mouse. Thank you. Appreciate it. And by the way, our city administrator is out, so we have Allie Gant filling in. So thank you very much. The floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. Joe Gatto, Andy Savoy, Core Spaces. Nice to see you all again. Thankful to be welcomed back. We're going to do a quick intro to us just for the benefit of the group, for the people that haven't been here. We'll try to be somewhat quick for it just because I know a lot of people have heard it. But to the extent we need to go back and double up on anything through questions, we'd be happy to. So Core Spaces was founded in 2010. We are a vertically integrated developer and acquirer of multifamily with a specialty in student housing. So we do more than just student housing, but we definitely do have a large presence in the student housing market nationally. One of the larger developers during the last decade. In fact, have done quite a bit of work in the Clemson and Seneca region. We own the pier and are just wrapping up the final touches on a 900-bed expansion just over at the pier, which I think we actually have some photos of it right now, which I think does a great job showing off a little bit about our attention to detail and design. That's really our, I think, claim to fame, if you will. It's what we pride ourselves on. Our founder started by developing single-family homes out of his parents' basement. So he, really designs down to the inch, and that kind of ethos has emanated throughout our whole organization. So really proud of the product we put forth, and it's a big reason why we're able to kind of do what we do. In a lot of cities, I think we have over 7 cities now where we've done more than 2 buildings in. And it's one of my favorite stats just because it's meant to say we've been welcomed back to those cities after we've developed. And so, we're hopeful that in working through this project here tonight, you'll see kind of what we bring to the table and what sorts of things we can bring to your community. We're excited to share it. Turn over to Andy.
Yep, I'll take it from here. And so the reason why we're here is because we are under contract and have control of the parcels shown in purple on that map. Kind of the center of the larger superblock between Kiwi Trail, College, and Tiger. And it's a site that doesn't have a whole lot of access, and we'd like to do what we do and develop a student-focused housing project there. And as we started to think to ourselves, how do we do this the correct way? We did some research on materials that were out there that showed what does the city of Clemson want to see here. And so the existing conditions are somewhat underwhelming for the location of the parcel. So it's mostly abandoned residential structures along Kiwi Trail. There is an office development in 2 buildings kind of in the center of that super block with a surface parking lot. And then this is the material we found on what's the roadmap to success here. It's the Uptown Next plan. that was calling for a total of 1,800 beds, a hotel, retail, and this is our site overlaid onto that plan. So we're right in the middle there. And what we thought to ourselves was we can accomplish a lot of the goals shown here and at the same time act as a catalyst for the remaining parcels within that super block that we don't have control of right now and we probably won't ever get control of. But when people do get control of them, I think that we'll provide a parking density and a nice tax base to help that area develop. And so that is what you're going to see.
And I think just like a couple of key things, just physically to latch onto, right? There's a large open space that's shown in the Uptown Next plan that's on private land. We are honoring that and doing the same with this development. That outdoor dining concept, we actually took from that as well. We call that our newspaper stand in the middle of this, acre private land park space. As well as, I think one of the key tenets of the Uptown Next, which I think we're going to hit a little bit more later. I don't want to steal too much from the thunder of the pitch from later, but the connectivity is really something that's super important for all of this to come together, as intended. And so one of the big things that this development will do is increase the connectivity from the lake to the heart of the Uptown development, of the Uptown neighborhood. And so pedestrian connectivity and vehicular. And so just something to note as we get through this to pay attention.
And you can see that there's boardwalks shown here that seem to intend connectivity between Kiwi Trail and College and also Wall Street. You can see a connector there. And so I'm going to quickly go through the introduction that we showed you back in August. This presentation has 100 slides in it, so I'm going to blow through some of the previous images rather fast so that we can focus on the new content. And so the original thought was, if that orange line is vehicular traffic, can we break that up and slow that down so that a plot of open space on our side of the road can be basically connected into Abernathy Park, and in that way kind of expand the park and almost double its size. And so we started with some park imagery, some inspiration imagery of what that could look like. This later, turned into more of a plaza than a park, but you could see kind of where we started with these images. This was the initial plan you guys have already seen. Basically, it is a 1,300-bed apartment project, student-focused, but we would lease to anyone, that would open up onto a plaza that then looks over Lake Hartwell, and for fun and to kind of sell the dream, we did renderings of what the park on the other side could look like. So that building kind of wraps around a large parking deck that's in the center of the super block, and there's various courtyards and kind of retail uses included within that.
I think the point being, we've designed a conceptual plan for number 2 on the plan, which is the publicly owned park space, but it is not our intent to design the park for the community as much as give an idea of what it can be and how this catalyst can help us all realize that, right? Which we're, as potential owners of this property for the long term, just as incentivized in making sure that gets developed in a wonderful way.
Right, and so this proposal is only for the privately owned land, the public park improvements. We have some ideas we can discuss later about how those could be funded, and also I imagine there's an extensive public process that goes into designing that that we want to keep separate from our proposal now, given the amount of time that could take. This just shows basically the blue is residences, the orange is lobbies and kind of active space at the ground floor. This is all stuff you've seen before. Again, the orange is vehicular and the blue is pedestrian access. And so 2 things to point out here is that we were proposing to actually resurface Kiwi Trail and make that kind of what we call a shared street, which is in Amsterdam, they call it a woonerf. And it's basically where you use paving materials and plans to kind of slow the traffic and encourage pedestrians to kind of use it as a shared street. So there would be pedestrians kind of crossing, at will there, and traffic would be encouraged to be slowed. So that's number one. And then number two, you see this blue arrow that goes from Wall Street down under the building and into that plaza area. And so we were proposing to connect the park at that end to Wall Street to kind of honor what was shown in that Uptown Next framework. This is what that looked like at the time. You'll notice that the upper part of the building was ghosted out because at the time we did not know what that looked like. And you see kind of a newspaper stand is what we call it, just a small retail building right in the center with this plaza that kind of surrounds it. At the time we had retail at the north end, and this could all overlook onto whatever the city would design for the public park improvements. And just for fun, we kind of were thinking about what could that include. And so we've shown some dock upgrades. We've shown kind of this this element at the bottom that could be used for concerts.
A sort of band shell, if you will,
Yeah.
to play to the.
And this kind of shows what you saw. This is that connection to Wall Street. This is a kind of a close-up of that retail and exterior dining that we would propose. This is a close-up of what that newspaper stand, quote unquote, looked like, and then kind of a faraway view of the building from the Abernathy Park side of the street. And then we were thinking, like, how could this be really used as not only an economic catalyst for development, and that will be, generating tax revenue, but could we programmatically act as a catalyst to draw people here, not just residents, but everyone? So how could this plaza be used? And so we've shown what that would look like. This could be a farmer's market or a food truck festival court. We could work to program that area so that there are actually events down in the park that residents are, all residents are invited to. Also, this kind of shows the other part of the park, but this band shell element could be used for an open mic night or perhaps movies in the park, but the park could actually be programmed so that people use it more than they do today, and that's the big idea there. So that's what you saw last time. I wanted to blow through that quickly just so that everybody here knows where we're coming from. Since then, we've been to Plan Commission twice, and we've been iterating on the design based on their commentary. I'm going to quickly run through what that looks like.
What was shown to the Plan Commission, right?
Right, and so this is the first iteration of what we showed to the Plan Commission. And so what you're seeing here is almost exactly what we showed previously. This is retail at the north side, just like you saw previously, the lobby's on the south side, and then on this, we had this underground parking for the public that would be for the retail and the park. And so you take it right off Kiwi Trail, and this side of the site is about 10 feet lower than it is right here, because you're actually going up a pretty steep hill. So you could just kind of sneak under the building, and there would be public parking there in that location. That's where we were proposing it at the time. The elevations were basically brick at the base for the first 2 stories, because we want to really create this like retail base, and then we tried to be very understated and austere at the top of the building. And so that's kind of what that looked like. And so their feedback, and this is in early November, is that the parking where we were providing it, you'd have to walk all the way down here and then around and then a long way to get to the retail. And so first of all, that's probably not an accessible path. Secondly, it's too far. And so that was kind of one thing they told us to work on. Move the retail space closer to the parking, kind of went through that. And then we heard some concern about the traffic, and it was proposed that perhaps if we could find a way for vehicles to pass through from Kiwi Trail through to Wall Street, through the site, that could alleviate some of the pressure on the Kiwi Trail and 123 intersection. So we thought we'd work on that, and then kind of diversify the housing options available was one of the comments. Reduce the height of the parking garage. They were concerned about how that would look from 123. And then refine the facade because they thought that it looked too office-like as we presented it, just kind of these kind of squares of glass. So they thought it looked a little cold. And so that's what we were told to do the first time around. So get to mid-December, what we did was we kind of revised the parking and moved the retail to the center of the plaza, so that you'd have, at this point, 63 public parking spaces, still accessible that same way, except you could park and walk through here and actually come out of a breezeway that leads you right into the center of the plazas, and that's all on the same level. So that even if, you know, you're in a wheelchair or something, you can just go right there and you don't have to go down any stairs or anything. And so the retail is now right next to that public parking component. We have taken the residential units that were there and swapped that location. And then this diagram just shows how you would circulate. So if you parked in the public side of the parking deck, the thought at the time was you could actually circulate up through this buried, this underground deck and come out 2 levels up on the Wall Street side. And so that egress wasn't all pouring out onto Kiwi Trail, but there would actually be some level of traffic coming out on Wall Street, and that would reduce the pressure on Kiwi Trail. And so that was what was presented to them. Another thing we did was we did take a floor off the parking deck per their request. So now we are about 70 feet tall on the parking deck side, about 82 feet tall on the tallest part of the residential side, which is generally consistent with what is around town, kind of at the high end of what exists here. This is how that looked at the time. You can see these kind of relocated retail and the townhomes in their new location. This is that underpass that brings you up to Wall Street. And this is kind of a farther away look at what that kind of looks like. So that feedback was basically good job connecting Wall Street and Kiwi Trail, but it's way too complicated. You got to circulate through this parking deck many times to get up there, so simplify that. Still work on the upper floors, still too cold. You have to add more residential scale, and show us what that the other side of the parking deck looks like, so that we can start to understand if that's going to be a giant eyesore from the ground, and provide us an actionable plan for how we're connecting to bus services. Either do that or sponsor a new line was one of the comments. And then clarify some details about maintenance and security of the privately owned portion of that park and how that will be handled, as well as how do we manage light and sound from the roof deck area, which we have on top of the project. And so that gets us to where we are today. We've been iterating with the Plan Commission, and the next step is to go back to them for a vote on a recommendation. While we put that package together, we wanted to come back and do this so that we make sure we get everybody's feedback in what goes to the Plan Commission. And so that brings us to where we are today. So right now, what we're going to propose to you, and this is kind of a revised per everybody's commentary, we have 1,325 beds and 450 units, 8,500 square feet of retail. Generally the same everything as has been in every presentation so far. The height did not change from what you last saw, so still about 80 feet on the residential side, 70 feet on the parking side. We have 674 parking spaces and 75 public parking spaces that would be available to the public and not for residents for overnight parking. The gross square footage went down because we did get rid of a floor of parking. And we have a little over an acre of publicly accessible plaza space, which we would then put a public use easement over for the public access. And just to be clear, the improvements, a lot of these renderings show the improvements on the other side of Kiwi Trail. I want to be clear, we are not proposing to actually build those improvements. We are proposing to pay a large park fee and also increase the tax base, which could be used to finance those improvements. We can get into what that means later. But first, I want to show you kind of where we started, where we are now. And so the Uptown Next total called for 1,800 beds. We've kept that bed number pretty consistent, and the unit number actually pretty consistent as well. We have steadily increased our proposed number of public spaces every time we come back. It seems like we add up more public spaces. And so we are using a lot of the density kind of planned in the Uptown Next, but there is a lot of retail left, a lot of hotel left, and that seems to be the best use for these parcels that are along 123 and College that have this great street frontage.
And I think we keep using that word catalyst, right? It's bringing the people here that allows for retail to survive and thrive, right? It's bringing the infrastructure improvements, not just to the public side, but to the private side of this development. So what that means is, the 75 parking spaces, that's how we get people to the park in a big way that allows for those retailers to be successful and allows for the community to make the investment into this park continuously over and over again, and to allow it to not just kind of be a one-time investment, but something that can grow to be something very special and kind of a regional attraction, right? That connectivity through the middle of the uptown neighborhood, can't stress enough, as a developer, how important that would be to me if I was a landowner trying to develop it myself or trying to work with another developer to build. Getting access to, all of this is huge for getting lending, getting, the economics to work for a potential deal. So really important stuff. And one of the things that's, we're throwing a lot of information at everyone that's hard for us as developers of privately owned land to communicate, but that's really important is, we can only control what we control, right, the private side. But the spirit of what we're trying to do is we're trying to free up public land to be put to its best use, which is a park, not parking. And so right now there's a ton of, I think there's actually 21 or 22 surface parking stalls on the south side of Kiowee Trail. By putting that parking and doubling it into our development on the private side, we can put that to much better use as a park and figure out how to make this that regional attraction that I keep alluding to. Sorry, go ahead.
All right, so I'm going to run through where we are now. These were the existing conditions. I kind of went over that. Something to note is there's about 40 feet of elevation change, basically from the right side of this image to the left. So you see that we're at 706 feet above sea level over here, and then down there, they're at 670 feet. So we have quite a bit of elevation change to deal with between Wall Street and Kiowee Trail. So that's something that everybody should know, because we're taller on one side of the building than we are on the other, and that's because we're on a hill, and we're kind of in the side of the hill. Just kind of showing the general layout, which is very similar to what everyone has seen before. There is trash and loading access through a court that is accessed via Wall Street, where we have actually had the call to, confirm that a fire truck, a trash truck can actually do a three-point turn there. And we'd have our trash room located back there, so it's basically concealed from view at all times unless they're actively picking up the trash. And so that kind of back corner of the project is where those activities would take place. We are proposing a pathway up from the underpass to the corner of Wall Street. And then the rest is pretty much as previously presented. This shows kind of an early look at how the utilities would go. Blue is water. We have purple that's storm, so we're basically outflowing into to the north and to the south, which are Corps of Engineering right-of-ways that then drain into Lake Hartwell. We have basically 2 water connections and our electrical services fed off of Wall. That is all subject to change as we go through the process with those utility providers, but the costs of all of that on-site work and whatever connection fees and impact fees that we would have to occur would obviously be on us. This is the architectural site plan. You can see this proposal has to do only with what's inside of that red dotted line, but we're showing for dramatic effect and to still sell the dream, this could be a great park, and this project could unlock that for the overall community. So what you're seeing here is we have basically simplified that parking. So this green parking is the public parking component. You still access it at the very bottom southern portion of the site along Kiowee Trail, except once you get up here, you can either turn into the public parking or you go up a speed ramp that lets you out up at Wall Street. So you don't have to circulate and drive in circles around that parking deck. You either park or you can just go straight and shoot straight through the parking deck up to Wall Street. So there's actually a vehicular connection through the project to help relieve pressure. And so this is what that looks like. So your car would come in at this driveway, enter the parking deck. This is a ramp, this white thing, and it shoots up one story. I have a section later that shows it. So you come out of this ramp here, and then you continue to go up a hill that brings you up to this level to Wall Street. And so we think that providing two means of access and egress for vehicular access will calm traffic to the best of our ability. And it provides this like vehicular connection that is shown in the Uptown Next plan, and we were racking our brains trying to figure out how we could get that, and this is the proposed way we do. Going back, we still are showing our residential lobby and entry experience right in front of the elevator bank. If you parked in this public parking deck, you would be able to actually go around the corner and come out through the breezeway as previously contemplated. This is all retail space. This central building is all retail space. And then we've moved the townhomes that used to be in this retail space over to the north side here. You'll notice we're just showing kind of what exists there now in these technical drawings here, unlike the nice renderings. So as we go up the building, you get kind of a regular residential floor plate, in this building. So you have the second floor of these townhomes, and then as you go up the building, that building spans over that underpass, and it goes into more of a typical floor plate. Note that we are covering the face of the parking deck with townhomes, so that it's not this just giant blank wall. So we have 3 to 4 level townhomes shown up against the side of a 5-level parking deck, and so I can show you what that looks like from the outside later.
Which I think is also really important too for when we talk about how we will fit in with the rest of the Uptown development, right? It will be, we're not just facing the back of a garage if the USPS site were to ever get developed, you'd have residential facing it. You'd be able to do some really cool things that, town center type feel where you could push people down to the park and create a nice, development of scale.
And so as we move up, we've also made our roof deck a bit smaller. It used to be the entire face of that parking deck. That not only is really expensive, but it's far more than what we need. And with the aim of kind of reducing noise and light impacts on any of the neighbors, we did make that smaller. This is a diagram, same colors as before, so orange is vehicular, blue is pedestrian, and you can see that now, that connection from Kiwi Trail through the project and up to Wall Street through that land. This just kind of reiterates what I said earlier about how you would then drive up. So in section, it's this one. I know you can't see this at all, but you would drive, basically this is Kiwi Trail down here. You would drive up a ramp and up to Wall Street, which is on the other end of the section. So now getting to elevations. I want to go through the inspiration imagery and kind of how we chose materials, how we chose the architectural language that we did. I did go through this a little bit in our initial presentation and then several times with Plan Commission, but just so everybody here knows where we're coming from, we have brand standards we try to employ in every one of our projects, but we also try to connect our project to the unique circumstances of the site and the place where it exists. And so as we started to think of like what language exists in the Carolinas that's really kind of defining, we really got kind of infatuated with these old mill buildings that have really beautiful brick, nice rhythm, some arched articulation. They feel heavy. We also like this kind of pure, simple geometry of pilasters that you sometimes see in old kind of Southern architecture. And so we started to try to employ those tools and see what that did to our building. Another thing we did from the previous iteration is we've added balconies, Juliet balconies, to basically break up the scale of the building. So now instead of just squares of glass that are all the same size, you have some varying size of the window panes. You have the Juliet balconies that add scale to the front of the building, and then you have this nice arched expression. And so this shows you kind of the material palette. So what you're looking at is a brick base with a combination of arches and kind of pilasters for the retail component. We have some ephes or stucco kind of residential components that float above the brick base that have a nice articulation and kind of pilastered articulation similar to the white building I pointed out earlier. And then you have some dark panels to basically provide some visual break between the white elements and the red elements. So something that will act as a background and kind of make that part of the building go away. And so that's how we started thinking about it. This is what that looks like in elevation. And so every time there's a break, there's actually a geometry change. So if you're looking right at the retail section, that's what you would see. Basically these white kind of residential fingers sticking out over this 2-level brick base. And then there's a slight angle, about a 45-degree angle, and this is kind of the residential entrance to the project, kind of defined by these arched moments. And then if you were to actually look to your left, there's a 90-degree angle, and you have the townhomes that then line up kind of adjacent to that underpass that leads you up to Wall Street. This is the back of that parking deck, and in elevation you can see quite a bit of the parking deck, but we have done an elevation of, we have done a rendering of what that would look like if you were standing right at the corner. And so these 3 and 4 level townhome units actually do mask that parking deck quite well when you're there, and so we wanted to make sure we had a nice face to that end of the building, because after all, if this is going to be a catalyst, we have to assume that the parcels adjacent to us will be developed, and we don't want to turn our back to that. So this is how that starts to come together. You'll notice we have kind of changed the architecture of that newspaper stand to fit better with this brick expression. Kind of rotate so you can kind of see that entire park view. That's what that looks like from the previous viewpoint. This shows you what that newspaper stand would look like close up. It's the residential entrance to the building. So that breezeway where the public parking would be accessed would be in between this mass over to the very left and this residential building. That's kind of a view. If you were standing in the plaza looking out on the Cartwell, that's what you would see. It's townhomes. Some of these are less finished than I would like, but it's another view of the entry. This is that underpass. And there we go. So that is where we currently are with the design. Should we need to add? No, I don't. I think we only have a few more slides left. As I said, there's 100 slides in here, so we're at slide 92. We're almost there. Before we open it up for questions, I guess I wanted to run through some of the public benefits that we're seeing as part of this project, and that we're kind of the reasons why we're excited about this project. The first one is low-hanging fruit. We're doing pretty much exactly what the Uptown Next plan said to do. We are increasing the park space, improving pedestrian connectivity, and we're activating public spaces with retail uses. Those come directly from the framework book, and we are doing all of those things. And I plotted our site out again here just so everybody can see the boundaries and what those kind of planned land uses were in that study, and we are very consistent with those land uses. On the note of improved pedestrian connectivity, we are proposing to add a sidewalk along Kiwi Trail that would actually connect to the improved sidewalk adjacent to Bixby, and so that basically leads to an existing CAT bus stop, and so there would be an accessible route from the project through the public way down to the bus stop there, which is what we're proposing. And this just kind of shows the goals of the Uptown Next study, and I put a little purple star next to the ones we're doing, so fewer curb cuts, doing that because we're getting rid of the residential structures on Kiwi Trail. We'll be providing broader brand new sidewalks with tree plantings and shade because we have the entire landscaped plaza area. We are removing the eyesore properties, those abandoned residential properties along Kiwi Trail, providing parking garages that support business, anchor retail to help fill the empty storefronts along College, and students in housing that generates fewer overall trips per day. We are providing walkable student housing where students would not have to have a car to live here. And then provide public parking on private land to ensure the success of Uptown. This is a study that shows basically the totals that were contemplated in the Uptown Next study. And then if you actually go through the ratios that are assumed, with our density, basically we would need 689 spaces. We are exceeding that parking density in both cases, providing 736 spaces. So we are proposing more parking than was contemplated in the Uptown Next study. And then lastly but not leastly, we are going to be paying large impact fees, including a park fee, and increasing the real estate tax base for this for these parcels on the order of something like $2 million per year for the foreseeable future. And you'll see that only about $600,000 of that goes to the city of Clemson, but a lot of it goes to the schools, and I would consider the entire thing a public benefit. And now, open it up to questions, feedback.
Questions, comments from council?
The parking numbers you showed, that included the surface parking that was demonstrated on one of those earlier slides?
That includes surface parking on the private land, but when there's surface parking, there is parallel parking that's shown along Kiwi Trail, that's excluded from
That's
our
excluded, okay.
Right, there's 9 of those.
And the public parking versus what you're taking away in the park, what's the net gain in public parking right there?
I did it by hand. I have not confirmed that with, deeded parking spaces, but I want to say we are doubling the public parking supply and doubling it and putting it on private land. So, right now there would be a tripling if you kept the surface parking the same.
Right, so there would be 75 public parking spaces in our structured deck. There would be 9 basically street parking spaces, parallel parking spaces along Kiwi Trail. And then I believe there's 21 parking spaces that currently exist.
And when I say doubling, that is net of expected retail parking. Right, so if you have 8,000 square feet of retail and you assume each one of those retail square footage has a 4 per 1,000 ratio, that's 32 spaces. And so when I say double, that's net of that. So 32 spaces on top of doubling, right? So if those retailers don't need the parking,
Right.
or you're a patron of a coffee shop and then they're going to go down to the park, it's really more like tripling the total.
Off of Kiwi Trail, you acted like that was an ingress, or is that a two-way, egress, ingress, when you come off of Kiwi Trail into the building?
Two-way.
That is 2-way. Go ahead.
Sorry, one of the things that intrigues me is you said, we'll rent to anybody, but how much of that housing is non-purpose-built student housing?
Yeah, so I think that was one of the things that's evolved through this plan as well. Technically, all of it can be leased by non-students. I think what we wanted to do was increase the supply as an adult who is no longer looking to live in student housing, increase the housing stock in this building that would be potentially something I'd want to live in, right? And so we do have townhomes now in 2 different areas where you don't have to enter into the same lobby as another.
Yeah, 3 different areas.
That's not what I call purpose-built student housing. Is everything you're building 1 bedroom to 1 bathroom, period?
No.
Okay,
It's
that's my
not.
question.
Yeah.
So how much of it is not?
It's hard to say off the top of my head, but
Well, like the townhome. To me, a townhome is someplace that graduate students could live. 3 bedroom, 2 bath townhome.
I agree, and I would expand that to non-students entirely, personally. And so that's where I was trying to take it, and that's why it's hard for me to give you an exact answer, because there might be different opinion, but I think.
Well, I mean, that's what I'm asking. How much is not 1-to-1 bedroom to bathroom?
We haven't laid out the actual plans yet, but we typically shoot for 70 to 75% what we call parity. So for the number of.
You might consider more akin to student housing,
Okay.
but
Right.
it's still early.
So you're saying the townhomes could be housing that's could be non-student housing?
Well, from our previous presentations, one of the things we took away is we need to provide a diversity of housing types here. And so you see the townhomes on the north side of the plaza. That's kind of a premium location for townhomes. And you don't have to go through a student housing lobby or anything. You just go straight through the front door. Same down here. Just go straight through the front door. And then also on the back, in front of the parking deck, you have those townhomes that kind of have a similar situation. So for what I'm going to call regular people who aren't students, who don't want to go through a student housing lobby, there's plenty of housing.
Not that it's necessarily a student housing lobby, right? If we have one bedrooms in the building.
No, it is.
No, but
It's okay, you can say it.
No, it's okay. My point though is that
That's what you're doing.
we do have, and I'm not trying to, I'm glad I got a chuckle out of the crowd. That's pretty funny. My point is, I'm not trying to say that this is limited to student housing. For instance, at the pier, we do have non-students living there. And so our one bedrooms at the pier actually have quite a bit of, not just grad students, but non-grad, non-student entirely. And so I don't want to hide from the fact that it's very likely to be filled with a lot of students in this building. But when we're answering your question about bath, right? So if one bedrooms are in the main building and we keep saying you have to walk through the lobby to get there, non-students may live there. What we're trying to really create is something that I think non-students are going to love, not just be interested in looking at.
Well, because that's my question, because throughout this project, and even in Next, you guys were paying very close attention, we repeatedly said that this needed to be a place where, and I'll quote John Fulmer, that if you have 80 to 90% students there, it's not going to be a place where adults are going to congregate.
That's exactly what Plan Commission said as well, and that's why we try to diversify the entry point and make it a multi-phased
I don't know that it's an
project.
entry point issue. That's my question. It's more of who's going to be there if I go to have dinner there kind of question.
And look, I think we understand the concern and we're trying to do our best. We could build all, one bedrooms or single family homes or whatever. We cannot prohibit students from leasing there, right? And so,
But I think the fact that they've got the townhomes now that could go either way, I think is something we hadn't anticipated initially. So, go ahead.
I can ask it a different way. Forgive me. So for my mind, we have the townhomes, the apartment style. The two questions is because most times we talk about student housing, it's by bed in terms of how we lease it. The rent is by bed, not necessarily by unit. So that's the question I have, is what percentage are we talking about will be by unit versus by bed, meaning the rent. And then the other question is what percentage would be of those beds would be townhomes? So what are we talking about really in terms of how many townhomes will be that where anyone could possibly versus the student? Because I know you changed it from 1310 to 1325 beds. And so do you have an idea of what that percentage is?
if you give me a moment, I'll try to answer that.
Okay.
I'm going to look it up really quick, just so I don't give you the wrong number. And then to answer the first portion of it, and that's where I was trying to get at, I'm not trying to sidestep it, but like a one bedroom, would you say you rent that by the bed or by the unit? There's only one, there's only one
That would
person.
be one, that's
Right.
a unit.
And so that's where it's harder for me to say,
Right.
that technically is rent by the unit. But
Right.
again, not trying to shy away.
We've got a 4-bedroom.
Yes.
That's not by the unit, but that's by bed.
And I think that's the best question, and I think that's where I can say definitively we are not shying away from. There's very likely to be students in that 4-bedroom rent unit, and we will rent to them by the bedroom.
So you will rent those by the bed?
Yes.
Okay, that's, but you're gonna look up the other information I just asked.
Alicia, one thing you got to keep in mind is if the townhomes, let's say a 3-2 or something like that, if they are out of whack as far as the per bed versus that rent, then people are going to migrate to that unit, and they can't say you can't rent that unit.
John, I'm well aware of that.
Okay.
Listen, I just want to know what the percentage in terms of it. So I know they can't deny
Right.
students. You can't deny people. That's discriminatory, so we don't want to be engaged in discriminatory practices.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and then I have one last question, and I'll probably just think, because I have to process all of this as well, and I hope to have opportunities to ask questions again. But when we talk about the retail, because I know we keep saying retail, do you have a idea of what type of retails we're talking? Because I think for it to be beneficial to this community, there are things that we are in need of and look for. So some of the things that, I don't want to sound like we said it before, but, pizza, wings, all those, something that's really family-oriented. And when we talk about people want to come and visit, you know, sit down, you know, really good shopping. There's a number of things that we talk about for this to be a place where people want to come and visit. So,
I think
thoughts about that?
Yeah, no, I mean, look, we actually care a lot about that because it probably is going to influence more so than almost anything else how successful our product will be. So we do oftentimes, for instance, subsidize a coffee shop because we think that the coffee shop experience, that kind of third place, is one of the most important things you can have. So that, number one, first and foremost, would be something we would see coming here. If it doesn't happen naturally, we would likely subsidize it to bring it. We are working with a local restaurateur who brings more of those wings that I think everyone's afraid of, but we are working with him to try to create, I think, a more family-friendly menu, just like a little higher end.
That's the guy out at the pier already, right?
Right.
Tom's friend.
Tyler, yes, yeah. Tyler's Brew Pub.
Which I'm still trying to get to. I haven't made it yet.
It's great.
It's the same bar food you get everywhere else.
Yeah. It's award-winning bar food, but it's bar food nonetheless. But he is very excited about the chance to potentially kind of step up to a little bit of a higher-end food menu for this particular project. And so those are just the two things that we can bring to the table. You know, we're interested in that retail filling with the best users, and so you know we've mentioned to people in the past if they know anyone who they think would be a good fit. You know, we've thought about ice cream shops, stuff like that. We think would be great. You know, it's hard for us to will it into an existence other than just trying to talk to the right people and offering the right price point, which I think is something you know we can commit to, which is important, right? Whereas you know, I think some developers would just say, you know, we're going to try to. We'll financially commit to it.
That's 5.6% of the units are townhomes, by the way.
You want to just repeat that for everybody?
5.6% of units are townhomes. That's the percentage of units, not the percentage of beds. It would probably be a little higher percentage if you did it by the bed.
5.6.
Yep.
So 94% is apartments, student housing.
Let me look at it. A second. Yeah, I think Andy was right. It was a little bit more than 5% of the building, yeah, for just that townhome product.
Other questions? I'll add just one thing. So from your previous experience on subsidizing the commercial space, how's that worked? How quickly have you gotten a tenant in there? Things like that?
I mean, it definitely varies. When you're committing to kind of subsidizing the retail like we've committed to doing so, it can happen a lot faster.
Right.
It varies. So our project in Knoxville right now, we have 25,000 square feet of retail, and as of today, we're opening in August of 25. As of today, I think I've filled 20,000 square feet.
80%.
So 80%, yeah. You know, we would love to, you know, bring more people like Tyler to the table, and even before we're approved, say, hey, look, we've got 6,000 square feet spoken for. Right now, I think we're close to 3,000 to 4,000. So happy to keep updating the council as we get more interested parties.
Any other questions, comments? All right, if not, I'm going to just repeat thank you very much for updating everybody up to this point. I'm going to turn it over, and please come up and sign in. Jeremiah, you have the list. You see Jeremiah, he just raised his hand. He's good, he's on it. Again, reiterate 5-minute limit for each speaker to come up, and please try to limit from repeating the same information. State that you're in agreement if you want to say the same thing, but try to bring something new if somebody else has already said that. And we'll just turn it over to just come on up. And Jeremiah is also going to be timing. You know, we give a little leeway. We've been doing this, thankfully, some of us for, I wouldn't say a while, but we want to make sure everybody has the opportunity to speak, and we'll be here until everybody has a chance to. Thank y'all for staying because there may be reference.
Does someone have control over the slides? Because I have a feeling people might want to reference.
Yep, there's a mouse here.
We can also
Give
help.
that to Ally.
Okay, that'd be great. I just know people will probably want to.
Here, will you hand it to Ally so she can be in control?
Yep.
My name is Christine Tedesco. I live at 128 Keller Boulevard. If you all could pull up the early slide that is a chart on density comparing Clemson next to what you've done. It's not that one. It has acreage on it.
That's a lot of slides.
It's a chart.
Isn't that one before? Right there
This one?
at the bottom?
No, it's just a chart with no drawings. It's very hard.
Talk through it, I can help.
Okay, it showed the acreage, I can talk about it. I think what most residents are concerned about is the density of this project. And in the chart that you showed us, the Clemson Next identified a little over 15 acres and 1,800 beds. And we're looking at a little over 5 acres for 1,300 beds. So there's quite a bit of difference there in density. So that's a big concern given that we already have very dense projects downtown. So my question to you all is, have you created this much density in a similar situation, and what was the impact? Because that's a concern for us.
Is that, can we answer? Sure. And that might not be the slide, but I'm happy to keep finding the one I pulled up. We have created this much density. I think there's a couple towns in particular where I think we've done a really good job kind of helping rejuvenate. One's really right now just active in process, and that's in Knoxville, Tennessee. People are really excited about it, but it's not built yet, so I don't want to use that. But Tucson, Arizona, we over a decade ago kind of helped work with the community to revamp their zoning code, and we've built 5 projects there and are about to build our 6th. It's, I think, been a, like a proud before and after kind of transition for the community. It's brought a ton of successful retail. Previously, residents would be driving to get to this area, whereas now they're walking. I'm trying to think of another really good example like that. Tucson, Knoxville, Blacksburg, Virginia is a little bit unique. We built something of a similar scale. It's been very successful. It hasn't really done much from a retail standpoint or a connectivity standpoint, just by the nature of that development. But in terms of, I mentioned earlier, we're vertically integrated, so that means we manage our own property and we own it for the long term. It's just a really good example of great product that's been well managed, that has great reputation, so you're not getting Animal House style student housing next door to you. So if anyone's ever at Virginia Tech, I'd encourage you to go see that one for a glimpse of what the quality of our product looks like and our reputation within the community. And then maybe in Madison, Wisconsin, if people know Madison, State Street, we really helped kind of rejuvenate. We took a dilapidated hotel and turned it into kind of the hot spot corner from a retail perspective. And it's like a block into where the road kind of terminates and it becomes pedestrian only, like Andy's favorite concept, the Woonerf. And so, that development, and we built a second one across the street and are working on our 3rd and 4th. That, I think, not that Madison wasn't a great street before, but go ahead.
Yeah, I guess, how do you, we're all concerned about traffic, and this is an additional 600 plus cars at this particular site. So in your mind, how do you see affecting the town?
In that case, then Madison is a great example, because Madison had a lot of similar concerns from residents, and just more generally from our investors, because we wanted to build less parking. But Madison, we said, these residents don't actually want to have a car. They need to have a car because the current housing stock is too far away from where they want to be. The retail, the demand drivers like a campus, whether you're working there or studying there. And so in Madison, for instance, we built a 1,100 bed project with 15% parking ratio. So, a lot of people thought at the time that parking ratio was really low. There's no way that they're going to be able to find the residents that would want to live there. But it couldn't be further from the truth, right? It was an overwhelming success. And what was fascinating about it was even despite that, so few of residents had that parking, none of them actually used it. We measured how many people were coming in and out, and it confirmed what a lot of people kind of knew, but it was that car parking for student housing is really not parking in the way that you and I know it, it's car storage. So they use it to get home, once a quarter, or they use it to go to a grocery store maybe. Most of them actually don't even use the oven. So a lot of times they're getting the groceries from local convenience stores or, non-traditional grocery methods. And so I think that as someone who, if I were to put myself in your shoes as a community member who lives here and wants to drive, this is like the greatest thing that could ever happen to a town. All of this density, all of the infrastructure improvements that come along with it, without the traffic problems that come along with that density typically. Because these people don't necessarily have to drive to get to work every day, right? And burdening that rush hour traffic that much worse.
Yeah, I guess it's, given that it's a bit far from the Clemson next plan, that's concerning. And I understand, I would hope that the parking garage would be car storage to keep additional cars off the road. But the density is a concern because it's 5 acres versus 15.
I got one question for you. Would you consider a different ratio in the parking based on what you just said?
I'm sorry, could you repeat?
Would you consider a different ratio, like a 0.4 or less? Would that put you at do you see that as putting you at a disadvantage?
We'd like to, no matter what market we go into, let the data kind of tell us, but I promise you we'll come back with that answer. My gut would be we'd be interested in it would be on the table for us to pursue. But for our equity partners and for an ultimate lender for this project, we'd just like to make sure that we have some data to support it.
And just to close the loop on what you're saying, in anticipation of the parking question, I've just done a comparison between what your path would look like every day if you were going to go to the student union from our site. It's either a 23-minute walk down the most walkable street in town, or you spend time getting your car, you drive to the commuter line, park, spend time doing that, and then you still have to walk 15 minutes to the student union. So it's quicker to walk.
So they're saying this is for students?
This will be
Should I sit down?
Yeah, if you don't mind, that'd be perfect. So yeah, just make sure, who else would like to speak, please?
Hi, I'm David Allison. I'm a resident of Clemson at 107 Prentice Lane. I guess, I'm not going to challenge the notion that students will walk to campus, okay? What I am going to challenge is the fundamental flaws in which they're making an analogy to the Clemson Next Plan. If you pull up the Clemson Next Plan, I'll point out some key distinctions. I don't know whether, can I do that or?
Allie's got control.
The same one that we had up
Within his
earlier?
presentation or the actual Clemson Next white paper?
Well, the one that he's got in the presentation, even with his property.
The one we was looking at.
Very, very early on.
Well,
You're talking about the overlay.
two fundamental differences between the Clemson Next Plan and this concept. One is the Clemson Next Plan involves a series of small city blocks, interconnected streets with smaller buildings, individual buildings. This is one massive building with continuous frontage along the lake.
Just past it, there it is.
Okay? So smaller buildings on smaller blocks interconnected. So that means the building scale, even though the density, I'm not frankly particularly concerned about the number of units, the floor area ratio on this property. But that's a fundamental difference between the Clemson Next Plan and this plan. okay? It's one continuous building facade across the entire length of the property. Not interconnected streets. So the thing about interconnected streets is you have multiple pathways to get out, okay? This depends upon two pathways to get out, Wall Street and QE Trail, okay? Neither of which are connected to each other except through a parking garage, which is not a public way now, which I will admit is maybe a better solution than the last time I saw this scheme. But still, it's not interconnected vehicular or pedestrian pathways, okay? The other thing about the Clemson Next plan was to promote a mix of slow vehicular traffic with pedestrian traffic. This plan dumps all 674 rental units, I'll say mostly students, parking spaces onto Wall Street, okay? They can only make a right-hand turn coming onto 123. So to get to the grocery store or to Walmart, which is where most of these students are going to go, they're going to have to make a left-hand turn off of Wall Street onto College Avenue. Within, what, 100, 150 feet? Not even 200 feet of the College Avenue traffic light, which is already congested and backed up on a regular place. So they're not going to be turning right to go to campus because, like you said, they're going to be walking to campus more than likely. It's going to be easier for them. But it's not going to be easier for them to get to Walmart or get to the grocery store. They're going to take their cars there. It's going to be an unmitigated disaster of dumping those 674 cars out of that parking garage onto Wall Street, which is a substandard city street as it is. And then they're proposing pedestrian connectivity down Wall Street. There's no sidewalks on Wall Street. They're putting 674 more cars coming out of Wall Street, and then they're producing a pedestrian way down through the building, which I like the pedestrian way. Don't get me wrong. I like the pedestrian way. But it's really a nasty little staircase that is unsafe. It doesn't take advantage of defensible space because it's not a friendly pedestrian path. It's not an urban pedestrian space. It's a sidewalk with a staircase down into this very nice passageway through the building. So there's no pedestrian connectivity that the Clemson Next plan had either from multiple places. I actually liked your original plan better when you had the pedestrian way going through a parkway. It was where I guess the Potbelly Deli is right now. I'm not sure which. So the original idea was connected streets with multiple pathways and smaller scale buildings on smaller blocks. That was the essence of urban design that represents the Clemson Next plan for this quadrant of the area, which this scheme does nothing to do. So this unsafe pedestrian pathway with no sidewalks on Wall Street, you're dumping extra cars out there. I think there should be a pedestrian way, but that's not where you dump 674 cars onto Wall Street. In my mind, it's much better to dump them onto Kiwi Trail because you have the chance of getting a traffic light down at Kiwi Trail than onto Wall Street. You'll never get a traffic light at Wall Street. Retail to parking from the public spaces to the retail, I'm sorry, I'm running a little bit late, is through a little narrow hallway that's is dangerous and counterintuitive. Who would find their way out of that parking space to that public park or that retail through that little hallway in the back of the building? They should pass through the lobby of the building. The townhouses face the post office. Who's going to rent those townhouses? Students are going to rent those townhouses because who wants to look at a service alley out only one side of your building with windows and then the back of the post office? EFS. I don't know how we attract such. I'm an architect, so obviously, such shabby architecture is all I'm just going to say. In this town.
We need to wrap up so we make sure everybody has the opportunity.
Developer's not responsible for the park. I think they should be involved in putting the park in.
David, one thing, he did in this plan say egress, ingress on the Kiwi Trail. Was a part of this, the last.
Pedestrian access to the retail.
No, you're talking about traffic on Wall Street.
Only for the commercial.
No, I don't think so.
You're correct, Mr. Cole.
Can you show me how you get there? Who's correct? Can you show me how you get to, out of the parking, that upper parking garage onto Kiwi Trail?
I'll pull it up while if you want.
So I'm a little lost on what the issue is here.
Parking access.
How you get from this is the public parking lot, is that correct?
That is correct.
The parking lot for the rental units is the one above.
That's correct.
And so how do I get out onto Kiwi Trail from that parking garage?
You would go
You have
down
to
the
drive
elevator.
through another parking garage. It's not a public street.
No, you would go to the elevators, see where the,
I'm talking about vehicles.
It's okay. So I can explain it. So the public would have a right-of-way over this, so it would effectively function like a public street. And if I'm a resident of the building who is parking in the garage, the main parking garage, I would turn right out into the service court.
Through another parking garage.
And go
and the
right.
trash truck is there and everything else. I mean,
Go right through here.
I'm sorry. I'm just sorry. This is just not good urban design. I mean, it checks a box, but it doesn't satisfy the intent of what the Clemson Next plan was. So, no one would intuit to go through another building to get out.
We need to keep going with comments, so.
Okay, thank you.
Alan Hodges from 100 Strode Circle. David just took a bunch of my thunder there, but my question is, he just explained that students don't need cars, but there's going to be 650 beds. You have no place to put a car if they have one. So I wonder where those cars are going to go. Which part of my street is going to have cars lining it? They can't get in the parking garage. I assume you're going to be charging for parking?
that's correct. Not for the public parking, but the public parking.
Yeah, for residential parking. And the parking for the public, how are they going to keep the college kids from parking there? Is that going to be police 24 hours a day to keep the residential parkers out of the public parking?
That's correct.
You're going to have a deputy sheriff standing there and chasing them away?
Yeah, there will be signs posted, you'll tell people to leave their cars there.
My next question is, Wall Street, as he just said, is not really a street. It's a mediocre alley at best. If you go north, you can only turn right on 123. Fine for going to Walmart. If you come out by the dollar store, you could maybe turn left 2 a.m., but not during the daytime. You can turn right to go toward campus. If you come out, as you say, winding through the parking garage into the public parking area onto Kiwi Trail, you can go left maybe. You can turn right, go toward campus. However, it's going to be 3 parking garages. The Bixby, these guys, and 412 College, whatever they're going to call that project now. You're going to have 3 parking garages with God knows how many cars, 1,200 cars or so, all coming out between the 2 Strode Circle areas. And I don't believe you're going to get a traffic light at Kiwi Trail. That'd be unlikely that transportation people would allow a traffic light there to make left turns feasible. But that's just going to be like a mixing bowl right there where Kiwi Trail runs into College Avenue. And I live close enough to hear the traffic all night long. Students do drive around here. Despite your theories, our kids do drive all day, all night. And they'll be celebrating in their cars. But that's my biggest concern, what they're going to do with all that congestion there. Maybe the city could buy an extra tow truck. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you.
Hey there, my name is Virginia Miller. I own 196 Kiwi Trail. If you could pull up the plot with the numbered buildings on Kiwi Trail.
I don't have control of it, but you're doing it.
It's number 16 on your map. So I'm curious just to hear, since we would be your close neighbor right across that small creek,
This one?
runoff, noise, the big change in elevation as you were talking about. So what would that look like, not only through the construction process, but just it being there? What would be facing our building?
I'm going to tap some other people for the first part of that question, and then
Okay.
I'm happy to answer the second part.
So, we can go like an elevation. There's an overview that shows it pretty well.
So the little chunk of land between 17 and 16 right now is actually Army Corps of Engineer land, so that will remain untouched and always landscaped in Little
That's
Creek.
a drainage way right
Yeah.
now.
Yeah. So I don't think anybody's ever going to touch that.
Okay, hold on one second. If you don't mind, excuse me, if you don't mind, let's make sure we're all listening to who's speaking, please. Thank you.
And then as you go along the drive there, you see a little row of residential units that'll have a little bit of landscape area in between the drive aisle and that area. So you'll see those units and also the side of that drive going up, but it will be kind of a landscape retaining wall going up to that edge.
And so that was, I think, one part of the question. So that's what you're going to see in terms of, during construction, really, it's going to be like about a year until the shell is kind of up and going, and then most of the noise and frustration, I imagine, is going
We've been through the first construction project of Bixby, so I imagine it would be similar in duration.
Yeah, probably going to be a very similar experience in regards to the construction portion of it.
Okay. And just since I work right there and we're right across from Bixby, a similar, I mean, they do drive. They don't even want to park in the deck. They park in our lot because it's easier than getting to the deck. So when we leave, in the afternoon, we're waiting at that stop sign over 20 minutes to turn left already just to get out on that road. And so a lot of them do walk, but there's hundreds of them. So the idea of adding this number of students or non-students potentially onto QE Trail, I can't even imagine what that would look like. Just seeing what it's been like before Bixby, now we have Bixby, and we've been there through both of those developmental processes. Like, it's a lot. Like, it really disrupts us. So the idea of getting this many more, it's hard to imagine what that traffic flow would be on Kiwi. And then I'm also curious, I don't know if y'all would have an answer, but just in the community, it seems like there is a really difficult time getting retail tenants to occupy those ground levels. I know before I bought that building that we were looking at some of those because there's not much commercial space available. So I wonder if y'all have plans on how to attract and retain people who could even potentially afford to be in those commercial spaces.
Just to answer the last question, I think one of the things we're talking about, we're rounding out, what this looks like, but the idea being we're going to try to create that retail in a way that, local, business owners will be able to occupy it. In other words, we're not just going to try to fill it with some national chain that can afford the highest rent or afford the tenant improvement dollars to build it out. Because on the first time of a new building, that's typically a little bit more excessive. So, we can try to document this a little bit better, but the idea is subsidizing this retail so that it truly is a successful focal point of this uptown community from the start. On the parking, I think we'll probably wait to hear a little bit more from others to address it all at once. But just one thing to note, I think, fully appreciate that right now you're getting people parking in your lot from across the street. I hope that the public parking component that we're creating help alleviates that a little bit. Not saying that we shouldn't park this thing right, and that's something we always want to let data tell us what to do. But hopefully the retail tenants that are being bugged by students parking in it are retail tenants in our building, right, versus neighboring ones. So for what's worth, we would obviously try to police that on our own private land, but there's going to be excess parking for that problem to be our problem versus yours.
Can I clarify one question? Is Kiwi Trail still going to be open for through traffic?
Yes, correct.
It's not two cul-de-sacs and empty space.
That's correct.
But
So it'll be landscaped and narrowed to try to slow traffic down.
Bob Hewitt of Folger Street. At previous discussions, there was talk about an amenity deck on the top of the garage. I believe the pool was going to be there, a basketball court, pickleball court. I'm very concerned about having all this activity 8 stories up, on the effects it'll have on the neighborhood. We live close enough there that I'm sure I can hear the football stadium, and I'm sure that I'm going to have the noise of the people having a pool party during the summer or whatever else. I'm very concerned about just what types of activity will be allowed up on the roof. And for that activity that is allowed, how is it done safely so you don't have basketballs flying off the top of the roof and everything else, and yet still look attractive? My second point has to do with the what they're calling the public beach portion of the lake portion. The city has to really be committed to spending whatever money is necessary to fix that area up, or it becomes a farce. It's just another student housing building without any lakefront amenities going to it. And if the city is not willing to say, yes, we're going to spend X dollars in X number of years, then let's admit what it is and not try to fool people by doing that. My last point is that we please remember that when we've been talking about traffic, Kiwi Trail is also where the Bixby empties out onto. So you'd be dumping traffic not only from this unit, but it'll get merged in with the traffic that's coming out of the parking garage from Bixby to come out at the intersection with College Avenue. So right now, traffic is getting worse and worse, and I just don't see how any of this is going to make it any better. Thank you.
Do you want to address the top part?
Absolutely. So on the question about the policing of the rooftop pool deck, you'll know we did make that pool deck smaller. That used to be the entire top of the parking deck. Not only is that extremely expensive to do, but we don't need all that space. We were showing pickleball courts previously just to take up space. And so we've right-sized that to be our typical program, which is around 10,000 feet of outside space with a large pool. That is open during daylight hours, so 8 to 8 or something like that, adjusted seasonally. And when it's closed, we have cameras and motion sensors so that we can know at all times if there's anybody up there. And we also have 24-hour security, who gets automatically notified if there's any motion up there. And so we have a no tolerance policy, obviously, of trespassing and going up there when you're not allowed. Any horseplay, throwing balls over the side, anything like that. We obviously have a zero tolerance policy, and our lease has a structure where we can find, it's a 3-strike system where the fines grow, there are parental notifications, and then there's just eviction as the 4th option. And so we do take that very seriously. Out of a portfolio of about 30,000 beds, that happens about 10 times a year. So that is not a very common occurrence, but that does happen, and we have methods to address it.
Appreciate it.
Good evening. I'm Chad Carson, 213 Lark Circle. I'm going to try to say 3 things in 5 minutes. Here we go. The first thing I was just going to say that I was involved in Clemson Next. I was on a committee for a whole year, and I just want to recognize the process that what this is happening in. And my opinion is that we've known this for a long time as a city, that change is going to happen. A lot of this change is out of our control, but that the Clemson Next was a very good effort to try to plan with that change as opposed to just letting the change happen. So I appreciate the fact that we have this conversation going on, because this is better than the alternative that we would have had 5 years ago. So that's my first comment, that I like that we're going with a plan that we've made as a community with lots of public feedback, lots of meetings, lots of input from our community. So that's number 1. Number 2, I think I didn't agree with all of David's statements, but I think the idea of grid and transportation infrastructure is my big concern. This is out of my league. I'm a pedestrian, and I love walking, and I love pedestrian connectivity. Getting that to work here seems like a really complex problem, but to me, that's the most important, more important than density, more important than anything else, is having the pedestrian and the road grid done correctly. Because some of the other things can change over time. You can change who's using the buildings, using the townhouses. I know we're concerned about single-use occupancy. That's this moment, but the grid that we have is what we have 100 years from now. So that's my comment number 2, getting that right. And then number 3, I'm just going to remind everybody that not too long ago in Greenville, there was a similar public meeting to this, talking about a bridge called Camperdown Way that was right over the falls in downtown Greenville. And there's a lot of people who were upset about change, naturally, and that they were tearing down this bridge that was going to create a lot of traffic, and people were nervous about it. I think this has a lot of analogies to that we have the opportunity, if we do it correctly, to have a pretty amazing amenity downtown park on our most important park in our town, to extend our downtown to a new area in uptown. I hope we take advantage of it. And I know you have the difficult decisions as leaders, but Greenville leaders at that time had to listen to a lot of concern from the public, understandably, and they made really good decisions. And it was not the popular decision, I'll say. So I think we need to do projects like this. I don't know if the details as presented are exactly the way we need them, the traffic grid being one particular concern, but I'm glad we're having something that could have an amenity that 20, 30 years from now, we're going to be saying, I'm glad we did something like this in Uptown.
Massary, 204 Wren Street in Delwood on the other side of town. I have a few points I'd like to make. The developers mentioned these towns of Blacksburg, Tucson, some other towns. My question would be in this, what's the resemblance of those towns to Clemson that is bordered by 2 different counties and a lake with basically 3 roads going through it when they mention similar projects? How does that work in Clemson? Number 2, what is the responsibility of the developer to fill these retail spaces? I heard a lot of coulda, woulda, shouldas. We've already had those, and we got a lot of empty spaces. So my question is basically to the city, what are we going to do to make these developers responsible for filling up these commercial spaces? And one other point I'd like to make here is that along with all this growth comes city services, police, EMS, garbage trucks, higher taxes, all that will be assumed by residents here. I'd actually, student housing, I don't see how it's going to fit on this, because basically what they said is we have 5.5 acres, 2.8 acres of green space, which leaves 2.8 acres for the development. For all this to go on, plus potentially an amphitheater, which is my next question. Somewhere in this conversation, did I hear the word dredging? That we have to dredge for that, to put a park in there? I read that somewhere.
That's on the city, that's not on them.
All right, so the city would have to do the dredging?
Correct.
If this park goes in?
Right.
Okay, well, we all know what that would cost and how long it would take and how many times we'd have to do it, because I've seen that done on a small lake before up in North Carolina. It is not a one-time shot. It takes a long time to do it. It is going to be quite a project and quite an expense. So, if that's not a problem, then here's my next next thing personally. If the city of Clemson could even consider dredging and the Corps of Engineers would allow it, then I would propose to the city, how about dredging Rock Creek so that everybody from Country Walk to Nettles Park does not get flooded anymore. I have pictures of my backyard that are horrendous. Thank you.
Others?
Good evening. I'm Stephanie Platt. I live on Mountain View Lane. I don't like public speaking, but here I am. I have a question for the council. Does the city have an ordinance that only allows 3 stories to build?
Yes.
Okay. So why are we giving exemptions to developers?
The 3 stories is on by right, as it's zoned. This is coming forward as a PD, so the zoning is not involved in that as far as those types of restrictions.
Okay, because, as a citizen, I'm not given exemptions, the things to build on my property. And I don't think it's fair, for developers to come in and present their student housing, let's say, is what it is. But, I just don't think it's fair, for, the developers to come in and build these, 6, 7-story eyesores. That's what they are. What do y'all think when y'all walk downtown? You think, oh, that's a beautiful building. How do you think the residents feel? Are y'all gonna throw us under the bus? Actions speak louder than words. And I hope you have the right actions. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to allow one more comment, and then, so if you haven't had a chance, we're going to start our city council meeting a little bit after 6:30, but you will have an opportunity in public session, so you will be heard, and you do have the opportunity. So we'll have one more comment, then we'll start the city council meeting, and then we will have public session led by our Mayor Pro Tem, and then you'll have the opportunity also to speak. So we just want to make sure everybody's heard.
Nancy Spiller, I'm at 210 Edgewood. Part of my question has to do with the issue of the planned development versus building, and I realize there are controls over planned developments, and it's sometimes the best of 2 bad situations. But I would ask you, if you were having to lower your density, or if you were having to operate within the zoning, could this still be a cost-effective project for you? No. Okay. Then I would say vote no. Because I'd like to have us stay within. I think this creates the park as an amenity for a student housing project, and I think that's what it will be. I don't think you'll have families down there. I don't think you'll have residents down there. I'm reaching a point. I walk down to the park. How long do I want to stay here? I would really like to stay in my house in downtown Clemson, but it's getting less attractive to be there. And I feel like many of you on council ran on a platform of limiting this kind of crap in downtown. And I don't quite see what, if we end up with something like this, I don't see what the moratorium got us, except more of the same. So,
Amen.
I hope you'll be wise.
All right, so we're gonna, y'all okay? Can we take a break? 5 minute break. All right, we're gonna take a 5-minute break.